Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jamstbad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Studies Srimad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Shri Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya ki, Go Premanande. All glories to the Desamo devotees. All glories to the Desamo devotees. All glories to the Desamo devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva. Verse 29. Swadharma Nishta Shata Janmabe Puman Virinchatam Eti Tata Param He Mam Avyakritam Bhagavato Ta Vaishnavam Padam Yataham Vibuddha Kalatyaye Swadharmanishta Shatajanma Bipuman Virinchatam Eti Tataparam Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Vaishnavam Padam Yataham Vibuddha Kalatyaye Swadharma Nishta Shatajanma Bibhuman Virinchatam Eti Tataparam Itimam Avyakritam Bhagavato Vaishnavam Padam Yataham Vibuddha Kalatyaye Swadharma Nishta Shatajanma Bipuman Virinchatam Eti Tataparam Himam Avyakritam Bhagavato Vaishnavam Padam Yataham Vibuddha Kalatyaye Apologies. Swadharmanishta, one who is situated in his own dharma or occupation. Shatajanma be, for 100 births. Puman, a living entity. Virinchatam, the post of Lord Brahma. Eti, gets. Tata, thereafter. Param, above. He, certainly. Mam, attains me. Avyakritam, without deviation. Bhagavataha, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ata, therefore. Vaishnavam, a pure devotee of the Lord. Padam, post. Yata, as. Aham, I. Vibudha, demigods. Kala atyaye, after the annihilation of the material world. Translation: a person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This verse gives an idea of the highest perfection of the evolutionary process, as described by the Vaishnava poet Jayadev Goswami. Pralaya payodi jale dritavan asi vedam. Let us begin tracing the evolutionary process from the point of devastation, pralaya, when the whole universe is filled with water. At that time, there are many fishes and other aquatics, and from these aquatics evolve creepers, trees, etc. From these, insects and reptiles evolve, and from them birds, beasts, and then human beings, and finally civilized human beings. Now, the civilized human being is at a junction where he can make further evolutionary progress in spiritual life. Here it is stated, swadharmanishta, that when a living entity comes to a civilized form of life, there must be swadharma, social divisions according to one's work and qualifications. This is indicated in Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, verse 13. Chaturvanya maya shishtam guna karma vibhagasha, which means, according to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. Unquote. In civilized human society, there must be the divisions of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and everyone must properly execute his occupational duty in accordance with his division. Here it is described, Swadharma Nishta, that it does not matter whether one is a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra. If one sticks to his position and properly executes his particular duty, he is considered a civilized human being. Otherwise, he's no better than an animal. It is also mentioned herein that whoever executes his occupational duty, swadharma, for 100 births, for instance, if a Brahmin continues to act as a Brahmin, becomes eligible for promotion to Brahmaloka, the planet where Lord Brahma lives. There's also a planet called Shivaloka, or Sada Shivaloka, which is situated in a marginal position between the spiritual and material worlds. If, after being situated in Brahmaloka, one becomes more qualified, he is promoted to Sadashiva Loka. Similarly, when one becomes even more qualified, he can attain the Vaikuntha Lokas. The Vaikuntha Lokas are targets for everyone, even the demigods, and they can be attained by a devotee who has no desire for material benefit. As indicated in Bhagavad Gita 8:16, one does not escape material miseries even if he is elevated to Brahmaloka, Abrahma Bhuvanal Loka, Punar Arvarta Norjuna. Similarly, one is not very safe, even if he's promoted to Shiva Loka, because the planet of Shiva Loka is marginal. However, if one attains Vaikuntha Loka, he attains the highest perfection of life and the end of the evolutionary process. Mamupechita konteya punarjanma navidyate. In other words, it is confirmed herein that a person in human society who has developed consciousness must take to Krishna consciousness in order to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka or Krishna Loka immediately after leaving the body. Tyaktvedeham punarjanma naiti mameti sorajana. Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, verse 9. A devotee who is fully in Krishna consciousness, who is not attracted by any other loka or planet, including Brahmaloka and Shiva Loka, is immediately transferred to Krishna Loka. Mam Eti, that is the highest perfection of life and the perfection of the evolutionary process. Swadharma nishta shata janma bi puman, varinchatam eti tata param himam, avyakritam bhagavatota vaishnavam, padam yataham vibuddha kalachaye. Translation: a person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma. And if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyacha Deshatarane Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Padidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is quite a well-known verse, and Prabhupada quotes it from time to time. There's a number of places where Prabhupada refers to this verse. And just an interesting little, it is spoken by Lord Shiva, but here he is referring to himself in the third person, like he's another person. He is someone else. That, first of all, if you swadharma nishta, if you're really nishta, really steady in your occupational duty, and you do it properly through, which can only happen if you're really fixed in it, nishta, really steady and stable in that position for 100 births. That's a long time. We need to not just aspire, but really try to be nishta in our Krishna consciousness for this lifetime. And if we can manage that, then, and means keep chanting our rounds steadily, follow the regulative principles without deviating off, and rendering service on a regular basis, we can go back to Godhead. Prabhupada said that perhaps, it'd be interesting to actually count, which would be possible, to count how many times Prabhupada said that, but it may well be more than anything else he said, or certainly really a lot. That if you're really nishta in your chanting, regulative principles, service, then you may well go back to Godhead. If you do all that, if you do it just for one life in Krishna consciousness. But if you do, and Prabhupada refers in the purport that you may be a Brahmin, and if you're really like a first-class Brahmin, really they would say Paka Brahmin, and somehow you maintain that, not just for this lifetime, but for 100, that really is quite something if you think about it. 100 births to maintain the same standards. How would you remember from birth to birth? Well, anyway, we don't know exactly, but if you did, if you remembered, if you were born again as a Brahmin, and you really were fixed like that, life after life after life after life, for 100 births, then you can come Lord Brahma. But if you become more qualified, an interesting little point is that Srila Prabhupada, in the previous version of this, the translation, he actually says that you can, because he just said you can have the post of Lord Brahma, but if you become more qualified, Prabhupada did say, then you can become Lord Shiva. Here he says, you can approach Lord Shiva. Of course, also interestingly enough, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada does say, actually, that you can become Lord Shiva. Anyway, that's all very interesting. But otherwise, if you're fixed in Krishna consciousness, and it doesn't mention 100 births or more than 100 births or any particular number of births, but if you're a person who's directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service, then you are immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. And then another point which Prabhupada doesn't refer to in the purport, I read through it and I was looking to see if there was some reference to this point that is there in the verse itself, that, as we just mentioned, if you're really surrendered, directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu in really unalloyed devotional service, then you are immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Whether, at whatever stage of the development of the material world that may happen, that you're just so fixed in pure devotional service, then, as Prabhupada said, you're just immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. But Lord Shiva and other demigods and Lord Brahma, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So Lord Shiva and other demigods, well, it may or may not include Lord Brahma, but the way the verse is presented, sounds like it must include Lord Brahma, because in order to approach Lord Shiva or become Lord Shiva, you have to become more qualified than you need to be to become Lord Brahma. So, but the thing is, through pure devotional service, you can immediately go back to Godhead, Krishna Loka, or Vaikuntha. Immediately, whether it's in the earlier stages of the material world, or somewhere in the middle, or wherever it is during the development of the material world. Sahasra Yuga Paryam Tam Aharyad Brahmano Vidu. This is stated, Lord Krishna states this in Bhagavad Gita, that one day of Lord Brahma is Sahasra Yuga, is 1,000. Actually, in this context, Yuga means not just like Kali Yuga is one of the Yugas, then, Satya Yuga, etc., etc. Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, each one is a Yuga, so 1,000 Yugas in that sense. But Sahasra Yuga Paryantam means 1,000 cycles of the 4 Yugas. Because sometimes that is, the cycle of 4 is referred to as a Yuga, or more often than not, a Maha-Yuga. The 4 cycles, the 4 Yugas together is a cycle, Maha-Yuga. So Lord Shiva and other demigods, Lord Shiva says, interestingly enough, Lord Shiva and the other, it doesn't say me and other demigods. He says Lord Shiva and other demigods. They may attain those planets of Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu after the destruction of this material world, which could be at the end of the lifetime. There are different levels of destructions and different types of destructions. But it could be, it would sound like either at the end of Brahma's life, which is at the end of either at the end of Brahma's life, or let's just say the end of Brahma's life, when there's a total destruction. So, Lord Shiva and the other demigods referred to here attain Krishna Loka, Vaikuntha Loka, only when there's this major destruction of the material world. But the devotees, they don't have to wait for that. Just whenever they become truly perfect and just truly in unalloyed devotional service, then, as Lord Shiva says, immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. So therefore we can understand that to attain the position of Lord Brahma or even of Lord Shiva, it's not as auspicious or beneficial as it is to become an unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's really Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, even though of course they may be great devotees, generally they are great devotees, but they're caught up in whatever they're doing in the material world, so they have to wait. But otherwise, those who are directly surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately, back to Godhead. So it's better, rather than, I don't know, I mean, some devotees have discussed, would it be a good idea to try and hang in there for 100 births to become a Lord Brahma? What do you think? The general opinion is not really. Rather just in one lifetime, really achieve pure devotional service and just go back to Godhead. Or, becoming qualified to become Lord Brahma, become more qualified, and then approach Lord Shiva or become Lord Shiva, because particularly Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes in Madhurya Kadambini that it is possible for a jiva like us to become a Shaktyavesh avatar of Lord Shiva, and in other words, take a form which looks just like Lord Shiva, and carry out all the different activities which are carried out by Lord Shiva. If for whatever reason, some reason, Lord Shiva is not going to manifest himself within the particular universe in question. Yes, so anyway, but those, people are on the material level. People are on the material level. They are, and if you really analyze and you really sort of look at the different types of people and what they go through and what they want and all that sort of thing, then you see that the conditioned souls are just so amazingly conditioned. They're just really conditioned. We mentioned on Tuesday, you may recall, about Lord Shiva, how he's Ashutosh, and he gets approached by jivas, materialistic conditioned souls. He gets approached not for pure devotional service, but for giving some material things. And, like comforts, a palace, or just very nice material situation. And Lord Shiva, because it's his duty given to him by the Supreme Lord, so he fulfills those desires. It's one of his duties, and not that he's comfortable with it, but he has to do it. Sometimes, for the sake of pleasing the Supreme Lord, sometimes you have to do something which you're not really comfortable with. Like, typically, at least for many people, and particularly in the very early stages of Krishna consciousness, you have to get up early. I remember waking up for the first time in the temple. I can still remember waking up in the temple in a special room. Actually, it was Prabhupada's lounge, but it was a special room which the senior devotees, couple of senior devotees, they would take rest in. And this was my first night in the temple, so just being nice to me, they said I could come in with them. Okay, so we did, and there was a carpet there. Upstairs in the brahmachari ashram, no carpet, just floorboards, wood, a little bit of paint on them, but no carpet. So anyway, first night, first morning, next day, they woke me up. They said it's 4. And it was like, what? What are you talking about? But anyway, what could I do? I had to get up. And I did. So, it's one of those classic things. There are all sorts of classic things, classic problems for devotees, sadhakas. And one of them is to get up early. At least initially, and for some devotees, it remains a problem for quite some time. Although Prabhupada, in the beginning of Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada makes the point. He makes the point that first of all, because it's there in Scripture and the spiritual master instructs like that, a person has to get up early. Although it's not like they actually want to get up early. But they sort of maybe begrudgingly a little, they agree, all right, I'll get up early. But Prabhupada says that when that devotee makes some progress, and Prabhupada mentions has a service of worshipping the deities, then after having made some progress, the devotee, when the time comes to get up early and worship the deities, the devotee wakes up and thinks, oh, how nice, I can worship the deities, and doesn't look at his watch again and think, is it really time to get up? Or something like that. No, but I can get up now, how nice. My body is sufficiently rested, so I'm not going to, I shouldn't be struggling to stay awake during the day. And I can get up now and worship the deities. What good fortune. Prabhupada describes like that. So, yes, right. But otherwise, take 100 births to become Lord Brahma, or even become more qualified. Sounds like you might have to take more births. You'd at least have to do more and achieve a higher level. Then you can approach Lord Shiva or become Lord Shiva if there's a need for a jiva to take the role of Lord Shiva. And this is becoming a Shaktyavesh avatar of Lord Shiva, as we mentioned. It's described briefly in Madhurya Kadambini Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Yes, so anyway, these things happen, and we were saying that the conditioned souls, sure, well, we were talking about Lord Shiva, wasn't it? How he fulfills the desires of these really, materially conditioned souls, who they seriously want some nice material facility, and it's just very important to them. In fact, it's so important to them that they basically dedicate themselves to achieving that, becoming qualified in those terms to actually approach Lord Shiva. Because as we read yesterday, if you remember, Srila Prabhupada said, it is rare for Lord Shiva to come and someone to see Lord Shiva. He doesn't just do that for everyone. But anyway, in this case, the person is seeing Lord Shiva and presenting his or her list. I would like these different things, like material luxuries, basically. And Lord Shiva is just saying, yeah, tatastu, so be it. And just giving everything quite quickly. But the conditioned soul in such a situation does not, seeing Lord Shiva and seeing the situation, the circumstances in which Lord Shiva is living, that person, worshipper of Lord Shiva, it appears that he does not think that, wait a minute, Lord Shiva is giving me all these things, but he himself lives like completely without these things. He lives in extreme austerity. I don't know if any of you have ever slept under a tree, but sounds pretty austere to me. No, not even a little camping mattress, if you know what I mean, or something like that, just on the ground. I remember the first time we went to Mayapur, 1976. We arrived in Mayapur, and there was a group of us, small group from England. They said, yeah, this is your room, there's the key, and it's over there, and this is the number. So there we went, and we walked in, and what was it? 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. And that's what it was. So I remember putting down on the floor, and it was a concrete floor, the dhoti I had been wearing that day, and that was it. That was between me and the concrete. But somehow I slept. Anyway, you develop the expertise of sleeping, it seems, in Krishna consciousness sometimes. I remember, anyway, it's okay. So, yeah. Well, I remember once, this one fellow, this devotee, who claimed to be a friend of Prabhupada's, and we were just innocent young fellows. He invited myself and one other devotee. We got left behind in Vrindavan by the group of devotees from England who we had come with. Because, not like they just abandoned us, but we had to wait for some deity paraphernalia to become ready. And then we would come back. It ended up being about 2 weeks later. So we met this fellow, or devotee, and he claimed to be a friend of Prabhupada, and he invited us to come and stay at Radha Kund for a night. And we thought, well, we just assumed because he said he's a friend of Prabhupada, he must be. And he had a calling card, one of these little cardboard cards, ISKCON representative at Radha Kund. We found out later, well, he just got them printed. And when you get cards printed, you can say you're anyone. You could say you're king of South Africa or king of the planet Earth if you want. So he just had those things printed, but we found out later he was definitely not a friend of Prabhupada, and he was definitely not ISKCON's representative at Radha Kund. There wasn't one. But anyway, we went and we stayed overnight, and in the morning we went and visited the main temples during Mangal Arati. It was interesting and quite nice. Oh, and then the night before, we went the next morning to those temples, there was a class, and he insisted, a Caitanya Charitamrita class, he insisted we attend a class in Bengali. the two of us, neither of us understood more than like, a couple of words of Bengali. Apni kemon achen? How are you? But that was the end of it. So we went to the class, and we're sitting there listening. Some Babaji was giving class, and there was a group, there's probably 20 or 25 Babajis there. And what did we notice? Take a guess. A few of them were nodding off in the class, dozing off. And we thought, gosh, in that sense, it's just like ISKCON. It doesn't happen so much now, either because the devotees are making advancement or they're getting more sleep. So one way or the other. Yeah, it seems better. There are stories of everyone falling asleep in the class. If they've been up all night, doing something, but they still have a Bhagavatam class the next morning, everyone falls asleep, and even sometimes the devotee giving the class falls asleep. So there are all sorts of, not just stories, but accounts of, falling asleep pastimes. Yeah, right. Okay, so where are we? So we were there with a jiva becoming Lord Shiva, or taking up the role of Lord Shiva. It happens. And then they're considered Shaktyavesh avatars of Lord Shiva. They're empowered by Shiva to function as he does. So, to go through all these things, the conditioned souls, what they go through. And the particular example we gave yesterday, that someone may actually meet Lord Shiva and actually present his or her desires, material desires, and Lord Shiva may on the spot fulfill them. But those people, they don't notice that Lord Shiva is living under a tree. What to speak of having a palace? He doesn't have even like a little straw hut or anything, literally nothing, and clothes. What to speak of what would you say? I don't know, but Pierre Cardin dhoti. Doesn't even have a dhoti. He just has some makeshift sort of thing around his waist. And so on like that. His facilities are minimal in the extreme. But the people don't notice that. And they don't think that, wait a minute, I'm approaching him for these things and he's giving them to me. But he doesn't want such things. And then they might realize, hey, that means that these things are not really worthwhile. So rather than just take these benedictions, I should follow in his footsteps and live a simple life. And because he always has his japa mala, and I should chant the names of the Supreme Lord and be a devotee like him. It just doesn't occur to them. I mean, how many Shivites are there just in South Africa? What to speak of the whole world? There are plenty, and just millions of them. They're attached to Lord Shiva because he gives them material things. But they don't follow in his footsteps. So therefore, and we mentioned this yesterday, they cannot be considered devotees, really speaking, even though Prabhupada sometimes may refer to them as devotees of Lord Shiva, but they're not actually devoted in the sense of real devotion, meaning pure devotional service. So, yes, so better just to make the effort in one lifetime to cultivate pure devotional service. And that can be swadharma nishta, as the verse says. Swadharma nishta. You can do your own duty. It could be in terms of just simple varnashram, your psychophysical nature. It could be, or it could be also, and it's a higher level, the service, the duty given to you by your spiritual master, or within the context of Krishna consciousness, bona fide Krishna consciousness. So either way, if you're swadharma nishta, if you're fixed and stable and steady in what is your real duty in Krishna consciousness, and you do that for your whole life, then you are, at the end of your life, you're on your way back to Godhead. And you don't have to go through this thing of taking 100 births as whatever it is, maybe a Brahman, as Prabhupada mentioned, to become Lord Brahma. And because it's mentioned, Prabhupada mentions in the 9th canto, there are 4, well actually it's not Prabhupada, it's mentioned in the 11th canto by our commentators. There are 4 types of Lord Brahmas. One's a pure devotee. One is a jnani, like a very elevated mental speculator, actually. Another is a staunch materialist, but still he recognizes the Lord, but actually he is just into material life. And then the 4th is some sort of mixture, any sort of mixture of any 2 or even all 3 of the others. So just to become Lord Brahma is not the solution. It's not necessarily the solution after 100 births to get there. It's not necessarily the solution. So therefore, or to become Lord Shiva after becoming even more qualified, that's also not the solution. Because Lord Shiva also sometimes gets sidetracked. I'm going through the 9th canto right now for the Bhaktivedanta course, and we just came across the story of Vrikasura. Vrikasura was we won't say devotee, but definitely a follower of Lord Shiva. And you probably know the story, it's very famous. In order to get the mercy of Lord Shiva, he decided he must offer his own flesh in the sacrificial fire as an offering to Lord Shiva. So he did, until there was no more flesh. There's just no more. All that was offerable still was his head. So he was about to just decapitate himself, and Lord Shiva appeared to him and said, hang on a minute, don't do that. You don't need to do that. So he said, just tell me what you want and you can have it. And Vrikasura asked, well, what I would like is the blessing that if I touch anyone's head, their head will just fall to pieces and they'll die. And Lord Shiva said, Tatastu, let it be. And then Vrikasura at that point was sort of eyeing up Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva, who was also there, and thinking, yeah, I'd really like to enjoy her. But Lord Shiva's in the way. But now I've got this blessing, let me touch Lord Shiva's head, first person. And he'll die, and then I can try to enjoy Parvati. So he was chasing Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva was running. But the Supreme Lord appeared in the form of a young Brahmin boy and told him that why are you taking this Lord Shiva so seriously? You really think that this blessing he has given you, or spoken of as if he's given to you, you really think it's true? Look at him. He's covered in the ashes of cremated bodies. He's got a cobra around his neck and various other things. Would you believe a person like that? He associates with ghosts, goblins, and hobgoblins, and pishacha, and all these types of beings, and probably Tikalosh. Why do you take him seriously? How can you take this person seriously? It's for sure the benediction will not work. Can't you understand that? And Vikasura said, yeah, didn't think about that. And so the Lord said, look, tell you what, just test it out on yourself. Touch your own head, and you'll see it won't fall to pieces. And then you know he's a rascal. Then you just kill him. So the fellow said, right, okay. Vrikasura touched his head, and his head fell to pieces. And that was the end of that pastime. Yes. So anyway, afterwards, immediately after, the Lord, who had appeared there as a young boy, Lord Shiva was expressing gratitude, and the Lord said, listen, don't you give any benedictions like this again. Don't do it. So Prabhupada refers to this incident sometimes, how Lord Shiva displayed, you could say, disqualification in this particular pastime. So therefore, to worship Lord Shiva is not really a good idea. Rather, cultivate pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the association of devotees. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. Early on you mentioned about the yoga cycles and the duration of the yogas and Brahma's life. And Brahma's 100 years, and Prabhupada in that purport, he described Brahma's 100 years as 311 trillion, 40 billion years.
Right.
Yes. So the question, if we went through all the species, could we have been Lord Brahma in our lifetime, or demigods?
Okay. Well, the basic answer is yes, certainly. We could have been, but having said that, Srila Prabhupada, it's in the 9th canto, and I think I can give you, let's see, I may be able to give you the reference in which Srila Prabhupada says that, I've got so many points here, sometimes it's hard to find the right one. Sure. Anyway, in the 9th canto, there's a verse in which, or a purport rather, in which Srila Prabhupada says that when the living entity first enters the material world, the first birth is as a Lord Brahma. He says it, just in sort of a straightforward way. But I just can't find it right now. But anyway, it's there. If anyone cares to have a look, you'll see that Srila Prabhupada makes that point that when we enter this material world, the first birth is as a Lord Brahma. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only birth in which we become Lord Brahma, but it's definitely one such births that we take birth as Lord Brahma. Just trying to find it, but I doubt it's the 11th canto, isn't it? It's the 11th canto. Anyway, I'll try and find it. I've got it somewhere. So at least at that time, according to, I think he's quoting Jiva Goswami, at least that time we became Lord Brahma, and there may well have been other times that we've been Lord Brahma. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
I've got it somewhere. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.